What up, dudes? It's Gaz, and welcome back to another Warframe video. Today, we've got the first of a couple top 10 lists for primaries. The top 10 AOE primaries in Warframe for the current year of 2022. So, I just want to go over some stuff before we get into this list, showing what the most powerful AOE weapons are in this game in the primary slot. First off, these weapons were all tested on the Steel Path against heavily armored Grineer. Secondly, this list is all about not having any buffs. This is the build that we use for everything in the gameplay footage you will see in all the placements. No arcanes to buff the damage of the weapons. No arcanes to buff the fire rate. We're not even using Nezha's second ability to debuff them. We're just using survivability skills and basically a slow to make it so they're easier to hit. And as far as weapons that were selected for this video, weapons that are actually fully AoE. So something like the Ambassador would not be on this list, even though it's bad in the first place. It has to be a weapon where I push the button, everything around there explodes. Nothing like where it's like a single target assault rifle followed by a AoE shot. There will be a separate list for pseudo AoE weapons coming up soon. Let me know how you guys feel about this video down in the comments down below before we get into it. And we're also going to have no ribbons or anything like that. Every build in this video you can replicate at home. No problem at all, okay? So make sure you hit that like button. This was a good amount of work and testing to put this together. Let's get into it first with the number 10. So basically the worst weapon on the list, we've got the Exceltra. Now, let me just preface this with every weapon on this list is a good weapon. The Exceltra it has a couple problems. We're basically looking at some pretty low status chance here, and it's got some AoE on the bullets, but it's not really. To be honest, the top 5 weapons on this list are just complete monsters. The kings of the game. The Exceltra is an AoE gun that can, it's holding its own on Steel Path. You can still main the Exceltra, and you could even, buff it with Rhino Roar and stuff like that. But with this 100 munitions build I'm about to flash right here, it is definitely at number 10. Without Prime Firestorm, the bullets don't even feel AoE, honestly. Now, to be fair, this thing does not need some of the weapons on this list need like a fire rate mod. They need a reload speed mod. The Exceltra can get away with its base fire rate and base stats without having to run any arcanes or anything like that. So it's pretty nice. Acolyte clear speed, not the best, but remember, nearly every build on this list is it's modded for heavily armored Grineer. So Acolytes, you want to mod for corrosive against them. Slash is not as good against them, but it's thrash and everything. So relatively nice weapon. I believe it drops from the Uranus Disruption mission, so it can be kind of annoying to get it. But it is a weapon you could main. Now the Ignis Wraith is not on this list. It potentially might be in the pseudo list. I'd probably say use the Ignis Wraith over the Exceltra, honestly. So that's why it's at number 10, the worst on the list. Let's move on to number 9. Slightly better weapon, I'd say, but I don't even see anyone using this thing, to be honest. And that's going to be number 9, the Secura Penta. Now, this is going to be prefaced with, I'd say if you want to use Secura Penta in 2022, you're going to need the special Napalm Grenades mod. And what Napalm Grenades does is it basically turns the Secura Penta into base heat and also ups the base stash chance as well. This is a weapon that you can't really fit everything on, unfortunately. I would love to put viral heat on here. Or not viral heat, viral 100 munitions, but as you can see, we need to run the Napalm Grenades mod to make it so we don't have to manually detonate, because manually detonating is very annoying. At that point, we only have one space for a elemental mod. If we were to put a cold mod on there, it would go from just heat damage to only blast damage. So unless you have a Riven mod for this thing, heat 100 munitions is probably going to be your best bet for what we're doing right here. But as you can see, for a Syndicate weapon, this comes from the Pair Sequence at max rank. It's pretty nice. It's a grenade launcher. If you're not using the Napalm Grenades mod, you have to manually detonate the grenades, which is very annoying. And of course, like I said, this whole video is about no buffs, no Rivens, no arcanes. If you are someone that likes to play mag, you can fire this thing into the mag bubble. Now, I'd probably say take off Napalm Grenades if you use mag, and that can destroy everything. So it's not meta at all. It's just good. So we've got it at number 9 on the list. It's definitely more of an AoE weapon than the Exceltra is. It's literally a grenade launcher. And, it's holding its own on the Steel Path with no buffs, no ribbons, no nothing. So, number 9 on the list, Secura Penta, not too bad. Now, here's one that probably could be number 10, but we're going to put it at number 8 for now, just because I have some hope for the future. And honestly, it didn't perform that badly. Number 8 is the Lens. You've probably seen the videos in the last couple of days, potentially, where we've been going over the possibilities of a Corpus Lich version of the Lens, as this thing is ancient at this point. But we're looking at a weapon with about half the base damage of the Kuva Brahma, one of the best weapons in the game, potentially one of the top weapons on this list. The lens is outdated. It also has a small mod space issue where you want to mod for fire rate in the lens really badly. The Kuva Brahma does not need to mod for fire rate. The Kuva Brahma's fire rate feels great. So yeah, that's number 8. As far as, how good it is, it's pretty nice. It's got a pretty decent AOE. It's got a cold bubble that, causes a cold proc. A big thing about a lot of these weapons is since Galvanized Aptitude, basically condition overload mods for guns don't work on AOE weapons, and that's what DE intended. That means that it's more about just big upfront damage. If you can get some viral procs along with your HM, that's great too, but we're just looking to blow stuff up here. The delayed explosion on the lens kind of kills it for me, but I honestly would personally rather use the lens over the Penta or the Exceltra. So as far as AoE weapons go, this is still, it's definitely Lich bait. This could be one of the most powerful weapons in the game if we do get the Corpus Lich version of the lens down the road, which I really do hope happens, just so lens fans can be happy for once. Because ever since the Brahma came out, the lens has been in the trash, to be honest. So that's why it's number 8 and not really looking too hot. All right, moving on to number 7. Like I said, these top couple, once we get to the top 5, those are the weapons you should go for. These ones are kind of just like, they exist, they're technically okay. But number 7 here, we got the Shedu. Now, the Shedu used to be one of my favorite ones in the entire game. Now that Sentients have become very easy, basically Sentients are just normal enemies now, the Sentient resistance when you empty your magazine is basically worthless for the purposes of this video. But, it's still got pretty good base damage elemental types. You can get some interesting combinations on the Shedu. This is a Hunter Munitions build here. Now, you could go for some more fire rate, too, if you'd like to. I put Hammer Shot on just for more damage, but that Hammer Shot slot is definitely flexible, letting you potentially run things like, increased fire rate, increased reload speed, maybe even more elemental damage. Keep in mind, though, that the crazy infinite magazine thing for the Shedu that used to work, it does not work anymore, so that's too bad. Additionally, this thing is very annoying to get. You have to get it from the Sentient Anomaly on Railjack, which... Are people still farming that? Like, maybe they are. It's pretty cool. It's a cool weapon. It's a cool, lore piece and all that. But as far as holding up for the current meta of the game, AoE is not very large. Prime Firestorm does not work on the shots. I believe it works on the emptied magazine thing, but that's not really the purpose of this. We're trying to just kill stuff with the bullets of the weapon, and the Shedu, unfortunately, gas damage got nerfed, corrosive damage got nerfed, corrosive status effects got nerfed, and gas status effects got nerfed. It just got nerfed, basically. So that's why it's not near the top. It's basically near the end of the list where all the bad stuff goes. So moving on to so I'd say after the Shedu, now we're getting into the actual top weapons in the entire game. These weapons that we're going over, the top 6 or whatever, this is the stuff you should go for. This is like the cutoff point. Shedu, don't really need it. It's like a collector's item at this point. Starting at number 6, we've got the Kuva Tankor. Now the Kuva Tankor, it might not look great in this gameplay footage. That's because... there weren't a lot of enemies grouped up, to be honest. The Kuva Tankor is a single-shot grenade launcher that comes from Kuva Liches. This is the first Kuva weapon on our list. And the elemental we've gone for on this build, specifically, is a cold Kuva Tankor. The reason for that is because I actually usually have a Toxin elemental on my Riven. So I'd normally recommend to you to go for, on the Kuva Tankor, for a Toxin elemental. The base Toxin. Because there is a mod called Prime Cryo Rounds that gives you increased ice damage. And ice and Toxin together makes viral, making enemies take multiplicatively more damage. That's including from Hunter Munitions / procs. Now, one of the things about the Kuva Tankor is that you kind of want to mod for reload speed. In the gameplay footage right here, we have Prime Fast Ends on the build. You also got Primary Merciless, which is the mod that the Arcane I'd recommend on most of this stuff. It's to let you spam it really nicely. The Kuva Tankor, it was almost number 4 or 5, but we're currently at number 6, just because I think the weapon right above this one is technically slightly better. It might scale a little bit better, but as far as like a nice spammable grenade launcher with good crit, and very good crit, is the Kuva Tankor. Now, one of the things that does hold it back from like the big, I'm going to call the top 3 weapons the big 3, because they kind of are. A lot of the really, really good weapons have like mini bomblets they drop after exploding. This weapon, the Kuva Tankor, it's just a singular boom with not great status chance. So the multiple like slash proc potential of things like the Brahma and the Tsar kind of hurt this thing a little bit. It's worse by comparison. The fact that this is basically a tier list placement, best weapons in the game list, we have to judge these weapons against the best stuff in the game, which is why the Tankor gets knocked down a little bit. Although it has very niche use cases where you can spam it. I guess the Brahma is more spammable, but yeah, the Tonkor exists, and it is an option if you want a grenade launcher. It has pretty good Riven stats. That's something it definitely has over the Tsar, and the Brahma is it has like basically double the Riven stats on the Kuva Tonkor. So yeah, get a Toxin roll if you'd like to try this out. It's pretty good. All right, so moving on to number 5. This is like the 5 strongest guns in the game, basically. Now keep in mind things like the Ignis and the Archiplasma and all that will not be on this list, although those weapons are extremely powerful. This is number 5, the Tenant Envoy. We've gone for a Toxin Elemental on the Tenant Envoy as well. And there's a very special reason for the Toxin roll on the Tenant Envoy. That's because the Tenant Envoy has base cold damage on the explosion. So with no elemental mods at all on our build, we have viral damage. You will see viral Hunter Munition slash procs in this gameplay footage with no elemental mods on the build. So what that lets you do, that lets you focus a lot on Hunter Munitions procs getting increased damage. You can see Vigilante Armaments, Hammer Shot. No elemental mods. That's because we're all focusing on getting bigger crits and more consistent viral procs to just get crazy armor bypassing damage. So you might notice we've run critical delay on basically all these builds. That's because critical delay gives a good little extra bit of crit chance. Now, the reason that the Tenant Envoy is not like number 1 or something like that is because this reload speed is awful. It's got a 4-second reload speed. Now, this might not be an entirely fair comparison, as the Tenant Envoy is meant to be used with other weapons. The way it works is like you fire it off. If you start meleeing or something like that, it will automatically reload while it's on your backpack. For the purpose of this video, we were using the weapon by itself, which holds it back slightly, as, you know, if you were like punching a little bit, it would be auto-reloading, but 4-second reload feels awful, even with Primary Merciless reducing that a little bit. Yeah. Now, the Tenant Envoy is a very fun weapon. It has a nice big boom on it, like sound effects. It's still a top-tier weapon, so I'd highly recommend it to you. And like I said, go for a Tox Elemental to get that base viral and go crazy. Moving on to the top 4, we have number 4. Now, this one might be controversial to some people, placing above the Envoy, but I feel like the utility of this weapon puts it a little bit above, even though the Envoy has much better crit stats. We've got the Proboscis Cernos. Hopefully I said that right this time. This thing, I believe, comes from the Clan Dojo. It's the tentacle bow. You fire it off, tentacles go everywhere, pull enemies in, and then at the end of those tentacles pulling enemies in, it will explode. It has base corrosive damage, I believe. This is one of the few weapons in the game that can do the combination of viral, corrosive, and heat damage all on the same build, making it debuff enemies in multiple ways. Corrosive reducing their armor, heat reducing their armor and stunning them, viral making them take multiplicatively more damage. And then it explodes at the end. This thing can clear out Star Chart like crazy. It's not great against Acolytes, as you saw right there. I punched the Acolyte to death because this is an electric build. Now, the reason this thing is above the Envoy is because of the versatility of this weapon. This is a pure electric build you're seeing here on the screen. Like I just said, you can do a viral corrosive heat build. You can do a purely viral build. You can do so many different builds on the Proboscis Cernos that I feel like that utility and also the fact it can pull enemies in is good enough to make it above the Envoy. Also, not to mention, this is the Steel Path right now. You're not always playing on the Steel Path. These tentacles can kill enemies through walls in normal missions quite quickly. Now, it doesn't kill as fast as something like the Kuva Brahma or the Kuva Tsar and stuff like that. But, you know, it's down here for a reason. The biggest thing that holds this weapon back is the low crit chance, but it's got so much status chance and so many instances of damage that it's probably fine, honestly. So you can definitely main the Proboscis Cernos if you want to. It's a good weapon. Like, it can definitely handle the Steel Path. No buffing. If you buff this thing with, like, Rhino Roar and stuff, it tears enemies open. So the reason the electric build is good is because, like I said, it drags enemies in, and it does so many instances of damage. The tentacles deal damage, and then the explosion deals damage. It just makes lots of electric procs. Enemies grouped up by electric, or grouped up by the tentacles will chain electric between each other. It's really, really good. So that is going to be number 4. Now we are into the big 3, okay? This is where the big boys hang out. This is the, you know, this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that it defines the meta of the game as far as I'm concerned. And speaking of defining the meta of the game, we're going to go over the best weapon in the entire game for arbitration missions. Expect an arbitration guide coming out in the future. I know people don't want me to make that video, but we're probably going to still make it anyway. Sorry, that one dude that complains all the time. We have the Kuva Ogress. Now, this is not arbitration gameplay. This is just, for the purpose of this video, we want to do everything on the same mission on the Steel Path against Armored Grenier. Even against Armored Grenier, this weapon with barely any crit chance can destroy. It's because of the Nightwatch Napalm mod. Nightwatch Napalm is a mod specifically for the Ogress and the Kuva Ogress, and what this does is it's going to make it where when you fire the rocket launcher off, it releases basically a AOE fire proc on the ground that chills and burns enemies. Additionally, you might notice we have heavy caliber on here and not crit. This thing is not a crit weapon at all. Heavy caliber will let you spread your rockets out further, making it so your fire coverage is larger. The elemental we've gone for in this video is a 60% heat Kuva Ogress, but I will let you know that as someone that has used a radiation and a toxin Kuva Ogress multiple times and switched between them, I'd say nearly any elemental in the game is good for this thing, with the most min-maxed ones being toxin, heat, and electric. Maybe even radiation. The reason the radiation one is okay is because it lets you do radiation corrosive, which is very good against the infested, radiation status effect turning off the infested ancient's auras, and corrosive just being a good damage check against the infested in general. So Kuva Ogress, really good. I've currently got the Unreal Tournament rocket launcher skin on. It looks really awesome. It's just a really powerful weapon. And the reason this is meta for arbitrations is because, like I said, that instant fire AoE on the ground, that goes through walls, and if you buff it enough with things like, you know, Mirage Eclipse, Rhino Roar, blah, 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 it does so much damage. The arbitration drones get one shot as soon as they spawn, meaning you can clear out missions as fast as humanly possible. So if you don't have a Kuva Ogress right now, here's your wake-up call. It's the meta. It's the meta for arbitrations. It's not the meta for this. Like, you can definitely kill faster with the top 2 weapons on this list, but this thing is still really good, and you can still main this weapon and be very, very successful with it, okay? Keep in mind, Prime Firestorm, it also does affect the area of effect of the fire that you leave on the ground. So, yeah. Prepare your computer. It's going to probably ruin your graphics card, but this thing is super powerful, and I highly recommend it to you with either heat, toxin, electric, whatever you want to go for. All right, here are the top 2 weapons. Now, the Kuva Ogress is the king of arbitrations. These other 2 are the kings of basically everything else. So we've got number 2 and number 1. Now, keep in mind, you might get mad that your favorite's not number 1, it's at number 2 instead. Guys, it's the Brahma and the Tsar, okay? They're both really good, but I'd say the Tsar is slightly worse than the Brahma, as the Kuva Tsar has a big reload issue in some situations. Now, if we were including outside things, outside abilities and all that, the Kuva Tsar probably would take number 1, but maybe not even, because this thing has a reload issue. We're not modding for reload because that's kind of lame. We've actually got a Viral Hunter munitions build just like a lot of the other weapons. And, you know, the Kuva Tsar is a meta weapon for a reason. And the reason this thing is so far and above many other weapons is because you fire... First of all, it has really, really high base stats. We're talking crazy high crit chance, crazy good status chance, you know, good base damage as well. And it also, it's a cannonball launcher and a shotgun. So if for some reason you need a shotgun up close, you can switch a shotgun on the Tsar and blast an enemy away. But once I fire off this explosive shot, afterwards, it drops mini bomblets on the ground, which can also crit and cause 100 munitions procs. This thing scales better than the Brahma, but it's less spammable than the Brahmas. If you're using other things like, you know, Bloodforge from Garuda, things like that, you can spam the Tsar all day long, and you still can spam the Tsar all day long, just with Primary Merciless, as we show right here, that gives you increased reload speed and increased ammo pool. If you run this build right here, you are set. You will not have any ammo issues, and because Vigilanting Supplies gives you increased crits, and it also turns ammo into the ammo type you need. If this thing didn't have a reload issue, it would be above the Brahma, potentially. Oh, by the way, did we say number 1 yet? Well, I did, probably 3 times already. Number 1 is the Kuva Brahma. And for the Kuva Brahma and the Kuva Tsar, I'm going to actively recommend that you go for a Toxin roll, just because it gives you the most potential for 100 munitions procs, as getting a base Toxin means you can run primed cryo rounds, which is for primaries, which gives you really, really high viral damage. You know, you could go for a 60-60 elemental, but for the purpose of this build, we went with prime cryo. We went with rhyme round for this build. So this is the build I recommend to you on the Kuva Brahma with a Toxin roll. As you can see right here, very, very similar to the Tsar build. Like I said, there's personal preference. Now, me personally, I run Point Strike over Critical Delay on the Brahma, as it is a bow, and you know, it feels pretty bad to me personally, because this thing does not need a unlike the Lens, which wants a fire rate mod, this thing has much fat. This Lens, this kills the Lens, basically. The Kuva Brahma, when that came out, it made the Lens users cry like an anime fan on prom night, to be honest. Hopefully you get that reference. But yeah, the Brahma is the king. Now the reason for this, look at this. Every time I fire the rocket arrow off, I'm immediately back at full ammo. Any time that someone tells you the Brahma has an ammo issue, they don't have a full build and they don't know what they're doing, because this is endless spam, 100% life support, extremely high scaling. You can even detonate it midair if you really want to, which I literally never do, but look at this coverage. This isn't even affected by Amalgam Furax Wraith, which increases the blast radius of many weapons. The Brahma's not affected by it, it doesn't matter. It destroys. It is spammable, very, very high spam potential, very high damage, And like I said, I'd say for the Tsar and the Brahma, just go for Toxin. You can go for Radiation if you want to for the Radiation Corrosive, basically Star Chart build. But as far as I'm concerned, the Brahma is the king and will be the king until it's nerfed again, because it's been nerfed multiple times at this point. But yeah, very, very good. Now remember, this is all with no ribbon. I have a really good ribbon for the Brahma. I got a really good ribbon for the Tsar. Did not use them in these videos. These are all replicatable by you. And is replicatable even a word? Who knows? Now, hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Let me know how you feel about the placements down below. Do you think the Brahma should have been number 2? Do you think the Tsar should have been number 1? I'm sure I'll get some comments like that. And as far as the other placements, like I said, guys, everything above 4 and 5, I was surprised how hard it was to make a top 10 list for AOE weapons, as many of them, like the big best ones, are they're already up at the top 5. And when you miss things like the Ignis Wraith and all that, guys, they're probably on the other list, okay? So don't lose your head over Ignis Wraith not being on this list, or things like the Archiplasmor, because I don't consider those like completely AoE, I consider those pseudo AoE, so look out for that next list coming out in the future. Hope you guys have a nice day and take it easy. Peace.